Right, so here we've got a follow-up tutorial of the defense in multiway pots, and now we're going to talk a bit about attack and counterattack. So learning outcomes for this tutorial. First, we're going to talk about how defense strategy in multiway pots leads us to understand how attacking strategy works. And then we're just going to talk about sort of general themes in attacking and counterattacking in multiway pots. All right, so just some review from defense. You guys should know the answers to these questions. So the first one, how is defense in multiway pots different compared to heads-up pots? And how is calling ranges constructed in multiway pots? So do either of you have an answer to these questions? These are pretty broad questions and with a lot of different nuances. So just say anything that comes to the top of your head.
Defense in multiway pots is going to be a lot tighter because our MDF, the MDF that is, well, in heads-up pots, MDF is, how it is calculated, but in multiway pots, we are going to be defending much less than that because both of the players needs to contribute to the MDF. So we can't defend as much as we can in the heads-up pots. And calling ranges is dependent on your position against the player who is betting. If you're in the middle position, you're gonna be calling with the range that is tighter than the betting player's value range. Am I correct?
Yeah, sort of. So there's two ways you can think about that. Definitely on the river, that's true. But on earlier streets, it's not necessarily true. Can you think of a reason why?
Which one isn't true before the river?
That if you're not last act facing a bet, you don't have to call hands that beat the value range. Not necessarily. Your range construction, the bottom of your calling range doesn't necessarily have to beat the bottom of their value range. On an earlier street. Do you know why?
Yeah. I mean,
well, if you're drawing to a hand that's going to beat their value range, top of their value range.
Okay, but how would you construct your range if you wanted to call draws?
You want to call draws that dominate the betting player's draws. You want to draw to the nuts, basically.
Yeah.
Nuts or close to the nuts.
All right, but what else do we have to have in our range in order for that to be profitable? Otherwise we just get squeezed, right? If we're only calling draws.
We have. If we are calling with a player behind us, left to act, then we have to mix in some calls with the flopped nuts, things like sets or something. So very strong hands.
Yep. So you need some traps if you want to have some calls with draws, etc. Okay.
So if you mix in some traps and then the draw completes, your range now consists of the very strong draws that would have completed and traps which lose a bit of value. So you have a strong value range, but your traps have lost value.
No.
Yeah, you should have when you're calling. There's other hands as well. You can turn like top pair and stuff into a bluff, if necessary. If you flat some top pair hands, but just keep that sort of thing in mind, right? So if you call, and you're not the last player to act, your range, while the bottom of your range might not necessarily beat their value, beat the bottom of their value, your range is still significantly tighter than their betting range in total.
Yes.
On streets other than the river. On the river, you have to beat their value because there's no next street for you to bluff with, right? So the whole point is, if say you're on the flop or pre-flop or on the turn, it'll be less on the turn because the equities are further apart. But definitely on the flop and pre-flop, you can call with some traps as well as whatever draws you want, and then because you have those very strong hands in your range, your calling range is much stronger than their range going into the next street, and so they should recognize that and then check to you most of the time, and then you would bet for value with the traps that you had, and then as a bluff, and then expect them to overfold, and so that's how your draws can call.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so knowing that, what kinds of exploits can you guys think about? Can you think of any exploits? Think of players which might not understand that. How would you exploit a player that doesn't understand that if the player that calls is not last to act, then their range should be tighter than your range?
I would be
Sort of, you know what I mean, right?
squeezing behind, maybe, if I'm behind.
Yep. Okay. So yep. So that would so squeezing would exploit the first caller. How would you exploit the person who bet? Say you were in middle position. How would you exploit the person to bet?
So the in position player bets, and I'm the middle position.
Yes, or something like that. And you know that they don't understand the difference between the two players which call. Or you're not in middle position. You're the one that's not last to act.
Oh, okay. I'm the big blind.
Yeah.
So
say like that, for example.
You might continue trapping if he continues betting. If he doesn't realize that your value range is actually quite strong. That you have traps in there, so you could let him continue to bet into you.
Yeah, if he doesn't know that big blind's range is very tight, then I would just trap him, probably.
Yeah,
But
so
on
that's
the
one.
other-
And then what happens with your draws?
Well, just continue to call him, I would think.
No. I mean, since we're exploiting, we could just trap with our good hands and check raise with our draws, I guess.
Yep, that's one way to do it. There's definitely one way to do it. All right. Okay, so knowing that, so say you've got something like big blind RFI and a cold call, a pre-flop. So this three-way dynamic, right? Definitely the cold call is going to have the tightest range out of the two other players, depending on what the pre-flop size was. And it should often check to the cold caller because the cold caller has the tightest range pre-flop. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Now thinking pre-flop, how would you exploit players that aren't going to check to you?
I would just
if
call.
you cold call in position.
You taught us not to cold call pre-flop, but if I do cold call, then I would just float his flop bet, I guess. Because, like, if he's not checking enough, then his betting range is weaker than it should be.
Okay. Yep. So that's a flop exploit. But what about a pre-flop exploit?
Oh. I would just not cold call, because if he's c betting a lot, then I should just free bet and be the aggressive.
Okay,
Be
yeah,
aggressive.
that's one way to do it. What about if you had aces and you decided to just call?
Okay, yeah, that's a good exploit too. But I mean, it can never be good to call aces, right? Because
No, so
I
what
mean,
you have to think about which think about all the exploits that you have available to you,
hmm,
right? And then weigh up whether trapping with aces preflop as just a call in order to have a very profitable bluff catch against their flop c bet is
hmm,
higher EV than three betting.
yeah, probably not. I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, if the guy is just opening and then overbetting every single flop, then of course it's better to just call with aces. But yes, it depends.
All right. You guys have anything else to add to either of these questions?
Hmm. So one thing is that, so if we're the middle position player, or I mean, if we're the big blind and bottom bets, and we have a player behind us, and so ever since your presentation, I'm not just calling in that spot, because nobody's betting 1/4, so everybody's betting like 2/3. I'm just either check raising or check folding. But like I'm check raising top pairs basically. And do you think that's a good idea, or should I just be folding top pairs too, if they don't have good backdoor equities, or good kickers?
Yeah, you can. Not all the top pairs are going to be strong enough to
Hmm.
continue. So it'll be you can fold some of the weaker top pairs, the top pairs
Hmm.
without backdoors in preference for like middle and bottom pair with the backdoors.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and those hands don't necessarily overlap with the um the value range, but
So
because you need to have a mixture of different draws when you continue.
so we're using the top pairs as kind of a bluff, right?
Yeah, it'd be a lot closer to a bluff than would be value because their value is probably just top pair,
Hmm.
right? So then when you raise top pair, you're bluffing against them,
Yeah.
trying to get them to fold better top pairs, try and put their two pairs in a spot, etc.
Okay.
But they also have in their bluffing range. They also have, depending on how high the top card is on the board. I mean, their bluffing range can consist of a number of overcards. So, check raising top pair for value could be good because what you want to do is have them fold out those overcards that could outdraw you on the turn.
Okay, then you're more like value bluffing, which is a sort of a different thing. Raising for equity denial, that sort of thing. Either way, your EV is still pretty low, because you have to put money in with sort of like a marginal hand. All right, let's go to the next slide. So this is just a review of sort of the folding frequencies as the number of players increases. So as you can see, the folding frequency is for even a very small bet. This is on average. Even very small bets goes up a lot when there's multiple players in the pot. All right, so we can see here, this is the bet size S on the x-axis, and Y is how often each player is folding. And against like a quarter pot bet, which is here, if there's 5 players, on average, you should be folding against a quarter pot bet. What's that, above 70% of the time, right? So yeah, folding a lot. Another review. So you guys have probably both seen the Multiway 0-1 games video.
Mhm.
And so from that, we know that imposition bets quite a tight value range with their bluffs. And the out of position player calls with hands that basically just beat the value range of the in position player. And then in order for the middle position player to overcall, they need quite a tighter range, right? So there's quite a gap here. And remember, like after it goes call overcall, right? Hands on this line for middle position are 0 EV to call. Right. So for a pot size bet, after it goes call overcall, hands stronger than like 0.9, I think it's 0.92. Right. It's like 0 EV. Okay. So if you think about in a multi-way pot, like a 3-way pot, and someone bets pot, and if the ranges are sort of similar, then after it goes bet call, in order to overcall, you need like a top 8% of the range type hand, which is like sets, right? Even 2 pairs is sort of dicey there against a pot size bet. If we add another player, right, what the multi-way solution would look like. So here, this is the 0.2/3. We add another player, this would shift up to around 3/4, and then the ranges would shift up accordingly with calls and overcalls. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Before we continue.
Yep.
All right, so let's have a look at some of the hand histories and see if we can use what we know about defense in order to construct some attack and counterattacking. All right, so who wants to go first?
I don't mind going first. If I think I put a second one up that I wouldn't mind talking about first.
All right.
It's the Ace King hand. Not sure it's the best example. I kind of put that one up last minute. I think pre-flop I made a mistake in that raising under the gun with this hand and then getting raised by the small blind and having the big blind call. Pre-flop probably want to 4-bet this hand. Mostly, I think calling some of the time is okay. I believe on the flop, after both the blinds check, I probably am better off just checking this hand back, because just thinking about it now, I've, my value range, got a lot of value hands with this type of flop. I got all the over pairs. I've got ace jack. I'm sorry, no, I've got some sets I would have flopped. So I would have called with like some kings, some tens, possibly some ace jack suited. Possibly pocket fives. So I open that up, and with the ace king, I think if I'm gonna bet and bluff with the ace king, I probably want to go with the having a club in my hand for the ace king. So I think in terms of attacking here, ace king of diamonds is not a really good hand to be going with. I probably just want to check that, possibly even check fold it.
Yep, okay. So, first off, we can think a bit about pre-flop. What do you guys think about what your range would look like, or should look like? So here you open a low jack, and then the small blind 3-bets you, and the big blind cold calls. So what do you think your continuing range should look like after the big blind cold calls the 3-bet? Or maybe a better question, what do you think that the big blind cold call range should be in terms of its rough strength?
Yeah, I think it's a strong hand. I think he's probably possibly jacks, queens, maybe some pocket tens.
He should also have aces time to time, right?
Possibly aces time to time. He's got a strong pair because with my having an undergun open in the small blind three betting that big blind call is that should be a very strong hand. So
Yeah, so it should be roughly the strength of a cold four bet. So big blind versus small blind versus low jack. I know the size is a bit different, but it would look like this-ish. There's a reason why you played four bet or fold, because like in order to call, your hand becomes so face up, and if your hand is so face up, you might as well have reduced the SPR by four betting. Anyway, so knowing this, it's sort of like this sort of range, maybe even a bit looser if right, something like that. So knowing how tight this is,
Calling range should be a lot tighter, right?
calling range should be sort of a subset of this, right? If there is a calling range, right? So it should be roughly the same sort of strength. Hands outside this definitely shouldn't call. Right, so thinking about that, with how strong the big blind's cold call range is, how strong do you think your overcalling range should be?
well, I think I've got to be ahead of probably half of his calling range, which means super strong hand. Aces, kings.
Yeah, so you're probably looking at like queens plus ace king type stuff. And so yeah, I agree. Like just I would fold basically everything, and then four bet squeeze when I choose to continue, because everything else is just going to have how DP against a big blind. You don't only 100 big blinds DP against a big blind. Everything else is just going to be really quite difficult to play, even though you're in position, because the SPR is so low, and you go multi-way. Like if you have like a pocket pair like tens, like you kind of have to flop a set in order to win, right?
Yeah. So So pre-flop, this hand's a fold. You're saying?
No, pre-flop this 10 is definitely a four bet.
Oh, it's a four bet, right? It's not a call.
Yeah. So I wouldn't have too many calls at all.
Yeah, calling sucks in this position.
Anyway,
Sorry,
so
Thomas, that chart you pulled up was that was the big blind's calling range, wasn't it?
the cold four bet versus three big blind open. So in the versus three bet, there's cold four bets. Maybe I should move it to another tab. Yeah, depends. Maybe I'll put more versus three bets up, and then some cold four bets. But anyway, so yeah, knowing that you really shouldn't have this. Anyway, going to the flop. Say your range was your four bet squeeze range. Say your range is like queens plus an ace king.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can bet because your range is tighter than those two.
Mm-hmm.
And then betting for a small size is okay. But the problem is, specifically on like a Jack 10 board, the other two players are just going to have sets all the time. So you should expect some of these players to have bet the flop. Right? So exploitatively, if these two guys are just going to check to you all the time, then their range is too set heavy for you to really be betting even like aces too often. Anyway,
Small blind should always check, no?
Yeah. So when this happens, right, small blind's three bet range is pretty wide, and then after it goes call, right, small blind should just be shit scared that one of the other two players has aces, So check everything. But big blind might decide to lead if he flops the set, knowing that he's value betting against a small blind, and hero here shouldn't have sets. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, if he leads, then you're going to have to you're going to be in a tough spot because their value range is going to be sets and overpairs, so you're going to have to continue with your overpairs. But then going forward, you're going to be in trouble. Anyway, so betting, and that's what one calls and goes go check, and that's okay, right? You can give up if your bluff fails.
Yeah, that was a strategy on the turn and river, was just give up. And I mean, this particular hand, I think the way it showed down, it was ace king, so we ended up splitting the pot. But
Yeah, okay. Small one should definitely not be calling ace king there, unless it was like clubs. So
This is the thing, right? Like,
well,
the big
actually,
blind-
they can call, say with one club, but then they have to have like trapped sets. So knowing that checking down is okay. But I would expect a small one to at least have led river as a bluff if they have ace king, right? Because ace king is still going to be the bottom of their range. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was saying our calling range pre-flop can be a loser if the big blind is cold calling a non-ideal range, right? Let's say the big blind is a fish, and he's just all over the place.
Yeah, okay, but I guess, but the problem is the odds that you're getting aren't very good, and you're going to be multi-way. Even though you're multi-way in position, if the big blind isn't continuing with a very strong range, then your 4-bet squeeze range can widen because you're value betting against the big blind, and then small blind has difficulties against that.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I was saying more in the sense of continuing, so we can 4-bet more maybe instead of calling more if the big blind is a fish.
Yeah, you can definitely 4-bet more.
Okay.
typically, I shouldn't really be having a calling range. You're saying in this kind of situation, if they're both competent players.
Or is there any other questions about this hand?
No.
Have a look at this one.
Yeah. This hand was a weird hand. So I've got a limper in the middle position. I believe I'm in the cutoff in this hand, and what I do there is I raise him button calls, and a limper calls. Now, on this flop, the big blind checks, middle position checks. I'm in position. I'm looking at my value range here, which obviously it's over pairs, ace king, possibly sets of nines, definitely sets of nines. Now look at my bluffing range. I kind of like betting here because I could certainly spike 2-pair on the turn. I could pick up a backdoor flush draw, so I put in a bet. Get called by the button. Then on the turn, I decide to check it because I don't really see any improvement here. Button checks back. I really should have bet on the river. I would have thought, because I hit my 2 pair. Yeah, I think I messed that hand up. I really should be betting that river.
Okay, so what we have is MP limps, and then you isolate, and now you face a call from the button. All right, and then the big blind over calls, and then the limper calls as well. So then you're four ways to the flop. Now, when you're 4 ways to the flop like this, who's going to have the tightest range? Okay, so more importantly, who's going to have a tighter range than you? Or at least who should have a tighter range than you?
I would say the player who's going to act immediately after me.
So yep, the button should have a tighter range than you because they called. And who else?
I would say the big blind as well.
Yep, so the big blind as well because they're called as well. And then MP it's debatable because they're closing the action, but
They're closing, yeah.
definitely 2 of the other players in the hand are going to have a tighter range than you. So what I would do in a situation like this is check my entire range to the button. You should bet a lot, unless I knew that either MP or BB or B blind are going to lead the flop a lot. Then arguably you can start betting, but oftentimes they're just going to check to the imposition players, and then so you can just check to the button. In terms of sizing, I would just go if I did decide to bet quite a bit smaller than this. So you're betting what, like a third of the pot, which definitely isn't necessary. So if we pull up one of those graphs again. Say this one with the 3 opponents. If you bet a third of the pot, they're folding like more than 0.6, right? They're folding almost 70% of the time. Betting becomes really, really difficult for you to get value. The other thing is like with 4 players in the pot, the weakest possible hand for you to value bet, if your size was 0, is going to be a hand that's roughly 3/4 of the average sort of hand strength. Right, the top 25% of hands would be the weakest of the value hands, and then depending on how big you bet, it's going to have to be tighter than that. So yeah, you can size down by quite a bit. So
right,
you can go,
but
if
you
you decided to bet, like I would bet less than 4 big blinds, especially on a flop sort of this dry. You're only really worried about a gut shot, so you can size down a bit, or you can consider using multiple sizes, which is very complicated. So maybe you just size down.
So checking to the imposition player, even though I'm the aggressor, that's the
Yeah, because button, in order for them to flat profitably, that they should have like ace king at least. Maybe some kings. Definitely they can have sets of 9s. But the problem is the density of those hands in their range is a lot higher than the density of those hands in your range. So
right.
And similarly with a big blind.
Yeah, and that overcalling or cold calling, their range typically has to be stronger than half of my range, or I mean, they have to be sort of towards the top half of my range in terms of what they're calling with. Is that it has to be much stronger?
Roughly quite a bit stronger than yours.
Okay, yeah, it's something I got to keep in mind as I'm playing. See, I really shouldn't be betting into that stronger range with, yeah.
I'm sorry,
as played, it's probably a check fold, I would think. Assuming the button bets.
Yeah, if the button bets, then it comes around to you. Folding seems okay. Calling, it depends on how big your bets, but if it's just tiny, then I guess you can call and hope to not be outdrawn. The problem is, if they bet too big, then yeah, you can just fold, right? So you got to be very careful about how big these players are betting, right? So then you think about roughly how big the value range is, how big, how often the other players should defend, and then because you're last to act, how often you need to defend in order to make them indifferent, right? And then there's exploitative stuff on top of that. Are they bluffing enough to make you indifferent to calling in the first place, right? So step one is figure out roughly where GTO would be. So if you bet like one big blind and it folded to you, then okay, yeah, GTO might be a call. Or two big blinds, then or three big blinds, then it's starting to get a bit dicier. But then the question becomes, is he bluffing enough? If the answer to that is no, then you can just fold, right? If he just gets really mergy and only bets like a 9 or better, and then a handful of gut shots, then obviously he's not bluffing enough, and so you can't call.
In terms of just at the table and trying to think through the size of Button's bet into 3 players, once I check to him, like if he bets a quarter pot, could I sort of like rule of thumb think that, well, that's almost like a 3/4 pot if it were heads up, given that he's betting into 3 players? Or, I mean, it's certainly a larger bet if I were thinking of it heads up and what his range might be.
Yeah, that's one way to think about it, right? It's actually quite a bit more than you would think, right? So we'll go back to this slide here, right? So he's betting into 3 players, right? Say if he bets the 0.2, right? Say if he bets 1/5 of the pot. Yeah, let's go with quarter pot, right? So quarter pot here means that you fold 0.2, but then against 3 players, right, you're folding almost 0.6, right? And that's on average. Okay.
And that's that would be an overbet if it were heads up. If I were going along the red line. Yeah.
Yeah. It would look like an overbet. Yeah. In terms of how often you fold, right? So it's all the way over here. That's the average, right? So you can think about if they're betting in even very small size into multiple players, right? Most bets look like overbets, right? Or at least 2 should look like overbets, and so you should be pretty cautious when continuing. Obviously, if you're last act, you have to call more, and if you're not last act, you have to fold more. Here, this is the Multiway 0-1 solution again. So if you can imagine a straight line between 0 and 1, right? That's what alpha would be, right? This is a straight line between 0 and 1. And so MP's calling higher than alpha by the margin based on roughly how much the opposition player is calling. Right, so here's 0.5, say for alpha 0.5, and if that shifts up to around 0.6 for a pot size bet multi-way. So if you're last to act, then your calling range should be quite a lot closer to alpha. Obviously, it'll be shifted up by quite a bit. But if you're not last to act, then your range would be even tighter than these curves up here, right? So here, if n equals 3, betting 3 players. If you're not last act, then you're going to be folding more than this number, right? Or whatever. You're going to be folding a lot more than the green line, right? So up sort of around here. And even if you're last act, it's definitely going to be somewhere between n equals 1 and n equals 3.
Right, because the green line is the average of all the players. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And that would mean the betting range. In my example of the button, if I were to check and he bet, I mean, it would be extremely polar, wouldn't it?
Depends how big they bet, right? So remember, when it's multi-way, one of the objectives that you want to have is to get heads up on the next street if you decide to bet, right? So if you decide to bet multi-way, one of the objectives is just trying to get heads up onto the next street. And so you can actually go really thin for value against the player to your right. in the hopes that you're heads up against them on the next street, and then check back hands and then play heads up against them across the next 2 streets. Say you're on the flop, you bet like a third of the pot into 2 opponents. You're hoping that the first guy folds, because if they call, their range is really strong. So you're hoping that they fold, and then that you're heads up against the player to your right. And then you can.
I'm with you. So the players nearest to you that are calling would have extremely strong ranges, right?
Yeah. So the players to your left, you want them to fold, right? So you're hoping that they fold when you bet, sort of like a weak value hand, right? So when you're value betting, you're value betting against the player to your right, hoping that the players to your left fold to them, and they call with a worse hand, because really only the duty for bluff catching rests on the guy to the right. For the duty for pure bluff catching rests to the guy to your right. And so if you bet with some value range, you should, the player to your right should or has to call with hands weaker than your weakest value hand in order to make you indifferent from bluffing. But players to your left, once they call, their range is a lot tighter than your value range. So on average, it's stronger than your value range if they decide to call. And so you should, if you end up heads up against one of them, often you should either check. You should play pretty cautiously on the next street, because their range is stronger than yours.
Yep, it's good.
And that's probably another thing that we haven't discussed so far, is if you were out of position and you wanted to call, say with a trap, and then you knew that after you call, you're calling with like draws and some traps, as well as some sort of middling strength hands as well, and that makes up the bulk of your calling range. And you're out of position on the next street, you can start to lead if players behind you fold, because your range is tighter than theirs. So you can donk.
Right, because button probably would have, in this case, the in position player probably would have had a fairly his range could include some thin value that would probably want to call your donk, your lead.
Yeah, and he has to just fold all the bluff hands that he had on the flop. So when you're constructing a betting range on the flop multi-way, it should be sort of similar to pre-flop, except like if you can imagine that pre-flop, everyone's range is 100% to start off with, right? If you were to bet, you're sacrificing your checking EV, meaning that in order to bet, you need to have a range advantage such that your checking EV is lower, because players aren't going to bet for you when you have a very strong value hand. And so you would have to value bet in order to realize all of your EV. So then you would value bet some strong hands and then check others with the intention of raising. So that's how if you're out of position. But if you're in position, then you can sort of get away with just betting most of your strong hands and then checking back some hands, and then using the turn card to make up board coverage. But even then, if you're in position, this is another reason why position is so good. If you're in position, the only player that's value betting against you is out of position, and out of position is out of position against all the other players in the pot as well. So that's why playing in position is really good, because out of position can't value bet very easily, because if other players call their bet, out of position is still going to be out of position, right? And they're going to be out of position against a player with a tighter range than them. It's going to be pretty horrible. And so that's sort of the part of the rationale why you can and should be playing 3-bet or fold from the small blind, because if the big blind calls, then you're out of position against two players, and you can't really value bet because you're value betting against the RFI. But if you get called by the big blind, the big blind's got a tighter range than your value range, and you're still out of position against them.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, got
So
that.
that's a bit of a rant. Does this help you understand where you
Yeah, that helps.
what sort of mistakes you made in this hand?
Yep, absolutely. That's
At least
very
in
helpful.
sort of the multi-way type stuff.
Mhm.
All right. So what's next? So there's a few here. Which one do you want to look at first?
Me
Yeah.
or George? I want to look at the last one first.
The pocket nines or the king 8?
King 8. I deleted the pocket nines. That was not multi-way.
Okay.
So yeah. Yeah, this is pretty standard pre-flop. I open button and small blind, big blind calls. Check, check, check. I think this is a good check. Like, because I mean I'm for betting backdoors, but this is not really the strongest backdoor I can bet. So I check, and on the turn, big blind bets. So now I'm kind of the middle position player from that multi-way example, and he bets quite large. So I think I should only call or raise. I should only fold or raise. So I do that. Then he comes over the top. And then since I was playing 10 tables, I kind of forgot the action and I just jammed it in. But that part is not that relevant. The thing is, I want to know, like, the small blind by checking the flop and then checking the turn shouldn't really have that many good hands and shouldn't really be posing a danger to squeeze behind. So maybe I should call the turn.
Yeah, because after small blind checks twice, the big blind is value betting against the small blind, right?
Yeah.
And so if you decided to call, right? So you say you want to call this draw, that's okay, right? But then you would necessarily have to trap some very strong hands with the intention of value betting those and then bluffing the draw after big blind checks to you on the next street.
Yeah, this is what I don't understand. Like on these, like in multi-way pots on the flop, we are kind of betting a merged range, right? Like you're betting some middle pairs with the backdoor, some bottom pairs. So when I check back in position in this board, on the turn I don't really have any good hand. Do I?
You can have
I don't think so.
9-8, 6-7, 10-7.
I mean, are we really checking back at 9-8 on the flop?
No, it's just a gut shot. So you probably should.
Yeah.
Check back a variety of different hands, and when you do bet as a bluff, you're probably going to bet like the 9-8 with a backdoor.
I might be checking back 9-8 without the backdoor. I don't know. Yeah, I might be checking that one, but with the backdoor, I just bet it.
You might have 9-8 off, so then if you have 9-8 off, you got a lot of 9-8.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have 9-8 for sure. Okay.
So you got 9-8, 6-7, 6-4 sometimes.
But the whole reason we should be trapping the turn bet is that small blind can't squeeze, right? It's not about big blind, or is it?
Well, when you decide to continue against the turn bet from big blind, you can either continue as you can either just raise everything, or you can construct a calling range, right? So if you raise everything, then your raising range sort of has to be tighter than their sort of value range. But if you want to call, you need to have some strong hands. One, so then the next street, the big blind just doesn't walk over you.
Right. Okay.
And two, in case the small blind chooses to squeeze, right? So the EV from like your United hands trapping is based on those two factors: one, the small blind squeezing, and two, the big blind betting the next street.
Okay. Okay. But if the small blind never squeezes, that the EV of trapping kind of goes down, right?
Yeah, it would go down a little bit, but then you have to think about what's the EV of how often does the big blind continue the next street after you call, right? That like they could continue as if they were heads up, right? Which means that you should always trap pretty much, because they should they should very rarely be continuing after you call.
Okay. The jam is just spewing. There is no need to jam. I just kind of forgot the action and just said.
Yeah. Okay. When you're in position like with enough stack depth left, there's almost never a reason to four bet. In position, post flop.
I was just playing 10 tables and I just said, okay, I have flush draw and double gut shot, and I don't know what happened up to this point. So.
Okay, yeah. Well, if that's happening enough of the time, maybe cut down the number of tables, by a few, so you can pay enough attention to each one.
I will for sure.
It's probably better to play like 6 tables well than 10 tables poorly.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions about this hand?
No, not really. I mean, you're saying calling here, it can be fine. Like, we don't really just have to raise the turn every single time.
Yeah. So you can call because you're not on the last street. Or even if you're on the last street, you can still call, right?
Yeah.
The whole raise or fold thing is more if you're out of position against the better, the player that's betting. If you're out of position and you're on an earlier straight, then yeah, definitely playing raise or fold is better.
So we have to be out of position to the better. Okay.
Well, it's not necessarily to be out of position. You just out of position, just sort of in general. If there's a player behind you, right? Think about the pre-flop strategy, which you have, right? So think with pre-flop solves, sometimes the big blind can flat. Sometimes the button can flat. Okay, right?
Yeah.
But players in between the players in between the RFI and the button almost never flat.
Yeah, never.
Okay, so if you take that one straight forward, that sort of idea one straight forward, and small blind almost never flats as well. So if you take that idea one straight forward, either you have absolute position, so then you can flat, or you're closing the action, so you can flat, and then everything else is three-quarter fold. But that would be mainly on the flop because the equity is a bit closer together still. But on the turn, as equities get further apart, then flatting becomes okay because them overcalling doesn't mean anything with a draw too much. Well, it also depends on the size of the bet as well, right? If the bet's really small, you want to raise because then just flatting draws because they have odds becomes a lot more difficult because they're no longer last act.
Okay.
So yeah, even min raises against bets because it reopens the action. It just makes it harder for players in between to continue. A lot harder for players in between to continue because the action has been reopened. All right. Any more questions about this, George? Do you have a question about this hand?
No, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think I said the 9's hand isn't actually multi-way, but it's actually multi-way pre-flop, and I think it's a good example of the this logic. And I've been meaning to ask you about this. Maybe we can look at
Yeah,
that.
we can have a look at.
Okay, so well, maybe not the. Well, I am button here, but okay. So I open small blind calls, big blind squeezes, and in this position, I kinda apply the multi-way logic, and I almost never call. I mean, not even almost. I never call. And what I do is I four bet to a very small size, kind of like 2 times, and this allows me to play a wider range, like not a wider range, but like I don't four bet big, so I bet four bet small, this which allows me to play a wider range. And uh, when they don't jam, their range is kind of capped, so I get to play better against that range. So is this like a good approach, or should I be incorporating calls? Maybe in maybe in button I might, but even then I don't like it.
Yeah, like part of the reason why you don't like calling is because then the small blind, because I don't know, a person who calls in the small blind is gonna end up calling the three bet after you call.
Mm-hmm.
So just min raising kicks them out.
Yeah, but
So that's
that's the
okay.
idea.
As an exploit, yeah, that's fine. And
But you're turning
if small blind was a stronger player, they shouldn't be in the hand to start off with, right? They shouldn't be
Yeah.
doing that to start off with. But say it was more like, say we were cut off and then button flats, right? So then you're
Yeah.
open cut off with the nines, button flats, and then either big blind or small blind squeezes,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay.
If you're playing quite deep, then yeah, definitely just play four bet or fold. Playing shorter, then you can start to think about doing the whole traps thing. But also that depends on just which size you want to choose, right? If you choose a small enough size that you can just four bet all your continues, then yeah, do that. Because you'll see if you choose a size that's too big, what'll happen is because you've chosen a size that's too big, you let the out of position player just play five bet or fold against you. So you need to choose a small enough size just to stop them from playing five bet or fold.
Yeah.
So yeah, 100 blinds deep, you can definitely do that. So you in the cutoff, you can just click it back, and then
Yeah.
But nines is probably the weakest pocket power to do that with from the cutoff. Maybe nines is definitely it's costly at best. But here with like button, small blind, big blind, yeah, nines is okay to do that with.
Mm-hmm.
But because you're in position against both of them, you can definitely have some flats if you wanted to. Only if you knew that after you flat, small blind should fold everything. Only small blind understands that. Small blind doesn't understand that. Then like you can start trapping aces, knowing that small blind's going to donate an extra 20 big blinds to you or whatever. But with some of the weaker hands, you would just raise it.
Yeah, okay. That's
so nice. Yeah. I like what you've done in general.
Yeah.
This is
okay.
fine.
Yeah, I realized that I was just not doing any good on these. Like somebody squeezes and I just call, and the other guy calls as well. Then the squeezer always wins in somehow. Like I feel like I'm not winning enough, so I just started just four bet or folding.
So that four bet is it's like a value bluff, right? You're obviously going to fold if he re-raises.
Yeah, of course. Like I'm basically like this is a merge range. I'm not doing any polarized four betting here. Like I'm only four betting like good pocket pairs, good like suited broadways, and maybe ace five suited sometimes, but that's about it. Yeah. Is that wrong? Like I feel like if you're four betting to such small sizes, we should be using more merged ranges, right?
Yeah, yeah. So if you're playing forward or fold, you by definition you're doing it merged. And when you choose a small size because you're going post flop, pocket pairs do pretty well because they can flop sets and then outdraw bigger pocket pairs.
Are you would he be range splitting with his 4-bet sizing here? I mean, would he include all of his value range here?
Yeah,
like a DA?
everything goes into this size. Everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
that's
otherwise,
that's fine.
I would just he would just run over me if I just
Your
forfeit
face
big.
up, yeah.
And this is sort of slightly different. If you open small blind 3-bets and then big blind cold calls a 3-bet, which is what happened in George's hand. Then there you can range split. Sometimes you can just jam, right? For definitely for button small blind big blind. There's enough room to just shove ace king offsuit and like kings, and then use a smaller
also
size
because-
with the rest of the stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, and also
Okay.
because big blind's range would be so strong, given that he called the small blind 3-bet.
Not that strong though, right? Like.
Well, in George's hand, it was low jack small blind big blind. So yeah, big blind should be pretty strong. But for like button small blind big blind, right?
Yeah.
Then yeah, you can definitely just shove kings and ace king off.
Okay. By the way, should I checked the turn back, but a player I respect very much told me that I should be betting the turn small again with most of my range, and then checking back the river. Do you think that's a good idea? Or I kind of thought that after you check calls the flop, nines is not a value bet, and protection isn't really that important anymore because, like with ace king, he has 6 outs, and there's only one street left.
Forward pots are quite a bit different. Out of position, I could get behind that. In position, yeah, maybe a small bet on the turn, then checking back the river would work. But the problem is this specific turn is running into a set a lot.
Yeah.
And a set or an overpair a lot. And you're not really getting value from much. So yeah, turning nines into a bluff. Well, nines is already a bluff pre-flop. And continuing that, I guess, is okay. It's sort of in the same sort of vein where you have to have some bluffs that give up. So whether you want to give up nines here on the turn or bet it on the turn and then give it up on the river.
I think I want to check the turn. It's better to check the turn. Because like he might just check jam. Things like, I don't know, flush draws or something. I don't know.
The good thing about 4-bet pots is that the sims are pretty cheap to run.
Yeah, I'll definitely run one.
Okay. All right, so another hand. It's ace jack one.
Oh yeah. I should be folding the turn, right? I open 2 calls. Then I just check the flop. which is standard, I guess. I mean, even if this heads up, I'd probably be checking this flop, almost sanded. Flop is 9-10 check,
Yeah. Okay.
and then player is kind of short, and I check call, and then he bets big again, and he bets 625, and he has 782 left. I check jam. I should be folding the turn, right? Or should I? I don't know. It's such a break that I just thought I should.
Yeah, I would
check
consider
jam.
folding the flop.
Folding the flop. Okay.
Because this bet is
Okay.
really big and it's into two players. And you have better sort of candidates. Like Queen Jack is a stronger call than this, and King Jack similarly is a stronger call than Ace Jack because of the gut shots, right? They got the extra draws that you need. So in terms of like the ranking, it would be like Queen Jack, King Jack, and then Ace Jack.
Yeah.
Maybe even Jack 8 as well, but before Ace Jack. In
Okay.
terms of which hand you want to continue.
But
And,
like, didn't
and
we?
you can also have diamonds as well.
Yeah. Okay.
This is what, a 0.7?
Yeah.
Yeah, 3/4 pot. So 3/4 pot into three players. And they should have the tightest range. So then, like, even more reason that both of you can overfold to that bet because of the whole checking EV thing.
Okay.
So 3/4 pot is around 0.4 alpha, right?
Okay.
So then you're looking at them betting top 80-ish% of hands, and then you will continue at around, and then you would continue around half of your range after the big blind folds. But you could, half is about right. Maybe even folding a bit more because of how much checking EV they would have to give up, right?
So top pair, top
again,
kicker doesn't fit in the top half of that range.
Well, maybe it does. I'm just saying that I would consider folding a flop.
Right.
But
the turn is definitely a fold, right?
Yeah, terms is a snap fold, right?
Okay.
Yeah. You just have so many better jacks to call with, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Jacks to call with, diamonds is you can have ace jack with diamond. It's an easy call. Even ace jack with a single diamond is probably a better call.
Wait, ace jack with a single diamond is better.
Because it can be turned into a bluff later if the diamonds come.
On the flop, you mean?
Yeah, on the flop.
But on the turn, it's the worst call, right?
I don't know. The guy's really short as well.
Yeah.
What else can you have? Yeah, just other pair plus draw hands are sort of better than ace jack without a draw.
Yeah, this is a fold on the flop for sure. Not on the turn for sure.
Yeah, definitely on the turn, and then consider on the flop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And remember, you should still have straights here.
Yeah.
Like you shouldn't have you shouldn't just check raise or straights on the flop. You should have straights on the turn in order to check jam.
Yeah, I'm checking 100% the flop. So I mean, it's even more of a reason to check hold the ace jack.
Yeah, and on the flop we can have like queens as well.
Mm-hmm.
Queens and kings, which obviously better call than that because they have the gut shot, and then on the turn, similarly, you can those are better than the double block the nut straight, that kind of stuff. So it's probably pretty low down your range on the turn, and then on the flop it's probably pretty low down your range as well. We can run it in Equilab if you want. Cut-off opening range. Just get an idea because like if you haven't run a lot of flops in Equilab and just seeing like where you are. Cut-off opening range. Okay, so say you open 100%. And then what was it again? This. That's not what I wanted. All right, so we can just like sort of rank them, I guess, on this flop. So obviously the straights, you've got a lot of straights, and then the sets, and then two pairs, and this is the other straight, and that's not the straight. And what else do you have? That's already 10%. And then queens and kings is better. And then we discussed that these guys are better as well, and then this guy is better as well, and then like this guy is better as well because of all the gut shot type stuff. And it's sort of arguable whether or not queen 10 is better. So jack 10 is two pair. Queen 10 and queen 9, they might be better as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of hands.
Yeah, so maybe you can't fold it on the flop, but on the turn, on the turn probably, on the turn it's definitely a fold. Where's aces? Aces, put that in. And then there's like flush draws.
Pocket eights is a check call or check fold?
Maybe with a diamond you can do that. Because I open ender. But the problem is the straight draw is so weak.
Okay.
So yeah, we're looking at 40-ish% of your range if you open everything before we get to ace jack. Right, so ace jack is pretty low down. So yeah, you can probably continue on the flop and then follow on the turn.
Okay. Okay.
Depending on where the flush draws are, you might have raised the flush draws at some stage. Or definitely you can jam them on the turn maybe because the guy's so short. But yeah. So yeah, back of the envelope math for you.
Okay.
All right, does that answer everything that you wanted to talk about for this one?
Yeah. Yeah. I should be checking the flop 100%, right?
Yeah. Just because. Oh, wait, you got hijack. Okay, my bad. I was analyzing cutoff. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, it would be even tighter than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be checking everything because like cutoff shouldn't call, right? Cutoff shouldn't.
Yeah.
Especially because if they're short, then there's even less reason for them to call. Because they lose the advantage that they have for playing deep in position.
Even if they call like broadways and pairs and stuff like that, like not really crazy things, I should still be checking.
Yeah. Even if they're calling a lot wider than they should be on this specific flop, Jack 10, 9, like your range is just crushed against the calling range, any sort of reasonable calling range.
Okay.
Right, they just have way more two pairs and sets and straights than you do.
Okay.
All right. So, do you guys want to talk about anything else, or any other hands you always want to talk about, or just sort of general topics you want to talk about?
Just a little note. We have the same combination of knotted hands, but his knotted hands are more densely in his range, right?
Yeah, because his total range is smaller than yours. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So whenever you talk about the strength of ranges, you don't talk about the number of combinations. You want to talk about the density of those combinations in that range.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Like 6 combos of aces is 6 combos of aces, but 6 combos of aces is very different in a range that's 1200 combos versus a range that's 36 combos.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely. I wasn't thinking like that before.
Calling ranges are generally denser than RFI ranges.
Yeah,
Cold calling ranges.
Cold calling ranges are significantly tighter. They should be significantly tighter than an RFI range.
Okay.
Remember, if you think about sort of this graph, the IP value is that, and so the total betting range is going to be that plus that. Okay, and so if in order for you to cold call, right, you have to beat your ranges has to be that much tighter, right? Tighter by about omega for that bet size.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you calculate what omega is and then roughly calculate what their opening range is as a percentage, you can just multiply that by 1 minus omega, and that's roughly what your continuing range should be in terms of strength. But it would be tighter even more so depending on how many players there are behind you. Right, so if you can imagine this was not the three-way multi-way, not the three-way multi-way 0-1 solution, but like the six-way, then it would be like a whole bunch of like very, very tight continuing ranges, and then the second last player to act would have a range which is very close to the better's range, and then like overcalling and stuff like that. But yeah, so if omega that you calculated, right, so omega is basically your pot odds. For example, let's say they opened a 3, right? So then you need to call 3 to win 7.5, assuming that the blinds fold. And so your omega is 0.4. And so 1 minus omega is 0.6. So then if they're opening 30%, you should continue with 18% if you have a calling range. And that's pretty similar. It's similar-ish to the 3-bet ranges, which I have in the versus open anyway. So if cutoff opens around 27%, yeah, so if cutoff opens around 27%, then around 27 to 30%, then we would expect the button to continue around 18%. Right, just from that math that we did, and we can see whether if that's the case in my ranges. Yeah, so here this is 15% if you add everything up. So that's probably because that there's small ones in there as well that can come over the top if you decide to flat, right?
So it's 15 rather than 18, yeah.
Yeah, well, it depends how much cutoff's opening. So if it's 27, then you multiply that by 0.6, 16.2, right? So if this is like 14 to 16 or 13 to 16 versus 27 to 30, then that makes sense because you're not second last act, right? Because there's still small blind to act behind. So you need to tighten up 1 pip because of that. But small one because the out of position has to play tighter. So they have power position for you. So do you guys have any other hand histories you guys want to go through, or any questions in general?
No, I'm good for now, Thomas. I'm going to have to drop out in a couple of minutes anyways.
I have a question. So on the site I play, people are not aware that they should be calling tighter in multi flops, and I mean not even. I'm not aware would be an understatement. So they are just calling as the middle position with any pair, any kind of draw they might have, and the guy after that is also doing the same. Uh, he's just calling. The guy before him calls, and he's just calling his middle pair with no backdoors or something. So against those players, when I bet small, by the way, which is what I do after that, after the multiway session, multiway teaching. So in order to exploit these players, should I be sizing up, or what should I do?
Well, definitely never bluff.
But never bluff. Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? If they're just calling any pair on the board, then just be really careful when the board pairs, right? Just bet all your top pair for value.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're not just betting against play to your right, you're betting against the entire field, which you know is going to call any pair.
Okay.
Right? So then top pair becomes value against them. And if it's like,
Okay.
and it's like you bet the guy to your left calls the middle pair, and the guy to your right calls the bottom pair. Doesn't make any sense at all. But say they do that, then like your top pair's gotten value from two players who neither of them should be in the hand. So yeah, never bluff. You can
Should I
still
be using the? Yeah.
you can still use a small size if you want to, right? That just allows you to get more value. Versus if you use a big size, people might fold. You can think about how. Oh, George is gone. You can think about how big of a size that sort of their threshold for just.
Oh, okay. So I should just size it up
whatever.
as I see, right? Like
Yeah.
okay. I should just look at how much they're gonna call. Okay.
Yeah, just think about how much they're going to call. Like, how much do they want to see the turn with to draw to their 5 outs?
Okay. So and by never bluff, you mean bluffs like backdoor flush draws, or do you mean like
No,
I
like
don't know,
no,
straight
don't
draw?
bluff at all.
No straight draw
Like
bluffing. No.
don't draw a bluff. You just check those, right? Because you just lose because they call too often. Why are you giving? You've got with a gut shot your 16-18% equity. Like, why are you giving? Why are you giving 80% of your bet to the other guy? If you know they're going to
Open-ended,
call.
like
Well, open end is
open-ended straight
36.
draw.
You're still giving 2/3 of your bet to the other guy.
Okay. But like if I have too much equity, I can bet, right? Like if I am like gut shot plus 1/over plus flush draw.
Yeah.
That
You can definitely do that.
Those are
Open enders, you can still bet as well. There's a whole like argument for like you need to set it up, set the size of the pot up enough so that you can sort of jam easily when you hit your draw. But the problem is you're not going to hit your draw often enough. Maybe you can bluff your opponent off on a later street, but that gets really complicated. And I think I went through sort of a similar scenario in the exploits, the exploitative play tutorial, sort of towards the end. And that was 4 hours long. So if you want to go through that, maybe we can just jump towards the end where we talk about sort of these weird multi-part exploits, which I just advise against. Right, if you're doing an exploit, just like pick your strongest read and then exploit that. Right, there's no like stacking multiple reads together in order to make some weird exploit because your reads in general aren't strong enough. Right, it's like multiplying. It's like multiplying a percentage by a percentage. It becomes smaller. Right.
Yeah.
The chance that you're right becomes smaller.
Yeah.
So yeah, the way I would do it, just not bluff at all, and then value bet really thin the top pair, and then if the board pairs or if they start getting aggressive, then you just let it go.
Okay. And sizes, I should just bet as much as they can call.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's what I'll do. Because I was just treating them as if they were playing optimal. And
it's good to think about what optimal play would look like from them, and then how they're deviating, and then how you then use those two to create your own exploit, right? So that's what we discussed, right? So what does optimal play look like? Well, from the multi-way pot stuff that we've talked about, what it should look like, and then how you're going to deviate from your own GTO in order to exploit these players that are just calling too wide.
Okay.
Right, size up a bit, only bet for value, give up if it's obvious that they hit. Right.
This is the same. Is this the same with the heads up plots as well? Heads up pots as well. Like for example, like the same players also are not folding the turn with their.
Yeah. It's the same. It's the same in heads up, right? So you have to know what GTO is in order to make a decent exploit. And you have to be pretty confident with your read in order to exploit them, right? If you're playing anonymously, then you don't really have any reads, so you have to rely more on playing nearest to GTO.
Okay.
In order to realize all of your EV, unless you know that the entire pool is doing something weird. But if you're playing with like a HUD, or if you keep notes on players, then over time you can build up enough information about how this player thinks about the game that you can exploit them. But you do need quite a large sample on them. Just a few hands here and there could have just been due to what they have for breakfast. So yeah, never make a big adjustment based on one or two hands that you saw of them.
Yeah, I lost a lot of money doing that. That's why I was just playing exactly as you advised against even those like obvious fish players. But yeah, I'm gonna make some small adjustments in multiway pots.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. That sounds good. Like, just be really confident with your reads first, right? So make sure that your read is old enough that you can make these adjustments.
Okay.
All right. Well, we might just end that here, and then there's another one tomorrow. And that's going to be on. What's that going to be on? Playing out of position. Heads up out of position with the advantage. So sort of like small blind and type stuff, and like 3-bet pot type stuff. Out of position, so that should be good, I think. Hopefully get some more people than just the two of you. But the two of you was interesting still. I hope you guys learned.
Yeah, I mean, thank you again. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.